Today on Hearts of Heroes, thousands of feet below the Earth's surface, a cave explorer has a near fatal medical crisis.
As soon as I saw him, I knew something was wrong.
I felt dizzy, nauseous.
He really was going to need a doctor and a rescue.
There is no cell service in cave. There's no communication in cave. And it reached the point of, yeah, if help doesn't get here soon, I'm probably not gonna live.
Saving his life became a 12-day ordeal, requiring a team of doctors, rescuers, and volunteers from around the world.
Bulgarians arrived, Polish arrived, Croatians arrived, Italian team arrived.
I was mentally preparing myself for the worst-case scenario.
In a powerful display of unity, these heroes demonstrate that teamwork truly does prevail.
Caving is an activity where people use rope to rappel into dark underground caverns. It's a thrilling adventure, but certainly not for the faint of heart.
One experienced caver faced a life-threatening medical emergency hundreds of feet beneath the Earth's surface. And it would take fellow cavers and dedicated rescuers to try and save his life.
In August of 2023, the world was riveted by the rescue of a man trapped deep within a cave in the country of Turkey. Mark Dickey and his girlfriend, Jessica Van Ord, sat down with Hearts of Heroes to recount their harrowing experience.
We both knew that it was not good to have internal bleeding in a cave. There's nothing you can do. You just have to get them out of the cave.
There is no cell service in cave. There's no communication in cave. There was not the resources necessary to carry me out of the cave.
We also caught up with Dr. Sofia Zandor in Budapest, Hungary, as well as rescuer Kevin Mulligan on expedition, both of whom risked their lives to save Mark.
These situations are tricky because they can get more severe just in an instant.
I was mentally preparing myself for the worst-case scenario. I really thought Mark might not make it.
Mark and Jessica have had years of caving experience.
Becoming a caver usually is not something that someone just jumps into. Your beginning is going to be a horizontal cave that you're able to walk into. You're able to climb without the use of ropes. And you go from horizontal caving to vertical caving.
Coming down.
Of course, it's a daring activity, and it's not risk-free.
Vertical cave, deep caves are usually considered the more challenging environments.
You need to be able to climb rope. We call it single rope technique.
You're far away from any 911 calls, any ambulances, any immediate help. You have to be able to be self-sufficient. You have to be able to take care of yourself pretty much from beginning to end of any caving trip.
Neither Mark nor Jessica is a stranger to putting their lives on the line. They're also trained first responders.
I started working as an EMT and then progressed as a paramedic. And then I got into caving and climbing and immediately into cave rescue just because I had the rescue in my roots.
I've been involved in emergency services for over 2 decades now. Fire department, EMS, technical rescue.
In early August of 2023, Mark and Jessica planned a trip to explore a recently discovered cave in Turkey.
The planning process to explore a cave like the cave in Turkey is extensive.
To stay safe, cavers utilize supplies like flashlights, food, water, and specialized clothing.
Mark did not doubt his ability or experience.
I've spent thousands of hours caving to progress to the deep 1,000-meter style cave, which is pure vertical, being explored as we go, bolting our way down, installing our own ropes.
When they got to Turkey, Mark and Jessica made the descent into the cave. Going this deep is not easy.
Oh, man. This is a scary one.
As you're working with deep caves, it's generally broken down into camps. We had a camp at 500 meters, a camp at 1,000 meters.
1,000 meters is about 3,000 feet. or roughly 2.5 Empire State Buildings.
You slowly work your way down through the cave. This is not a 1-week occurrence to get down 1,000 meters. It takes an extensive amount of time.
Once Mark and Jessica made it all the way down, they decided to go even further and explore an underground dome.
The area that I was exploring below 1,000 meters, no human has ever been to. It was completely unknown.
When they reached the dome, they tried to climb to a hole in the top.
The goal is to reach a hole in the ceiling, we call it a window, and climb into the hole and then go up and around and maybe even deeper down after that.
But suddenly, things went terribly wrong.
I was at the top waiting for Mark to come up, and he comes up clawing his way up this really muddy slope. Looks sick, he's hunched over, and he says, "I'm sick," and just starts rattling off his symptoms.
I felt dizzy, nauseous, that I was slightly losing consciousness.
Immediately, as soon as I saw him, I knew something was wrong.
Coming up, Mark's condition takes a frightening turn.
Mark was getting worse. He really, really was going to need a doctor and a rescue.
But first, a tip for those adventurers that might someday save a life.
We could all benefit from taking a first aid class that includes CPR training. But for those living a more adventurous lifestyle, there is a certification called WFA.
WFA stands for Wilderness First Aid. This specialized training goes beyond basic first aid. WFA teaches you how to handle a medical emergency when help is miles away and calling 911 isn't an option.
Participants are trained in prolonged patient care, survival in severe environments, and creating improvised equipment. So if you're an adventure enthusiast, sign up for this important course, which is offered remotely and in person. Stakes are high when you go off the grid, so sign up, be knowledgeable, and stay safe.
In August of 2023, adventurers Mark Dickey and Jessica Van Ord were exploring the depths of a cave in the country of Turkey. Suddenly, more than a mile underground, Mark got very sick.
I felt like I was losing consciousness. I felt all sorts of signs that indicated something is very, very wrong with my body.
They got Mark down to solid ground, but things took a turn for the worse.
I then vomited blood.
They realized from his symptoms that Mark was internally bleeding. Jessica knew that she'd have to leave Mark to get critical medical supplies.
There is no cell service in cave. The only options that you've got are hardwired communication systems. We had comms run to 500 meters.
Jessica got herself up to the 500-meter base camp.
Unfortunately, when I got to 500 meters, the phone wasn't working.
Jessica had no choice but to climb the rest of the way out of the cave for help.
I get to the surface, everyone's around the campfire, it's nighttime. They're all happy to see you, of course. And then, unfortunately, the first thing I have to say is Mark is sick at 1,000 meters with a GI bleed. So he has internal bleeding.
With her background as an international cave rescuer, Jessica began calling all of her contacts.
I just got medical advice, and I let people know there might be a need for a rescue.
Meanwhile, a handful of explorers made their way to the 500-meter mark and repaired the phone. But they called with distressing news.
We got an urgent call. Runners had gone from 500 to 1,000 meters, and they said Mark was getting worse. He really, really was going to need a doctor and a rescue.
Coming up.
My blood pressure was steadily dropping. I reached the point of, if help doesn't get here soon, I'm probably not going to live.
Jessica Van Ord had climbed 3,000 feet out of a cave to get medication for her boyfriend Mark, who was internally bleeding and still deep in the cave. But when she reached the surface, she was told that his condition had grown bleak.
I was on the surface about an entire day waiting just for the medications to arrive. Waiting is the hardest part because every second that I'm waiting, Mark is bleeding and he's losing blood that he can't get back. And it was really on us to make sure he's going to survive at that point.
Down in the cave, Mark's chances of survival were dwindling.
My status deteriorated. I continued to lose a substantial amount of blood. My communication went from talking in sentences down to phrases, down to single words. If I don't get direct assistance, I'm probably not going to live.
By this time, hundreds of people from the international caving community started responding to the urgent calls for help, including friend and fellow caver, Kevin Mulligan.
I was actually at a regional cave event, and someone runs up to me with a cellular phone, says, Kevin, there's a Hungarian doctor looking for you. The doctor explains to me I should probably get on a plane and head up to Turkey to meet up with the other Hungarian team.
At the entrance of the cave, medical supplies started arriving. Jessica began the descent back down into that 1,000-meter cavern.
I had the IV fluids, I had needles. I didn't wait for the doctor because I'm a medic. I was going to be his first rescuer.
But time was running out for Mark.
My blood pressure was steadily dropping. If help doesn't get here soon, I'm probably not going to live.
With Mark's life hanging in the balance, Jessica arrived.
Mark's in the fetal position, barely talking, and I give him the IV fluids. He slowly starts to get better.
Mark was stabilized, but he needed a blood transfusion. Soon, Dr. Sophia Zandor, or Dr. Zudi, heard about Mark's case.
I had experience with cave rescue as well as with treating patients in the ICU.
But getting down to Mark with supplies would not be easy.
We didn't know the cave at all because no one was able to escort us down. So we have to discover it by ourselves. It took 13 hours for us.
Zudi arrives with 3 people, and they have more blood. So we have slowly more resources trickling in and updates with each new arrival.
We don't really treat people outside of the hospital with blood. But I was quite confident in myself that I have the experience.
Over the next few days, more rescuers arrived, including Mark and Jessica's friend, Kevin Mulligan.
I got down into the cave, and rescuers down there were short-staffed, and they were like, can you help with this? Can you help with that? So I ended up staying down there for quite a long time.
Mark was improving, but he was still in no condition to make the trek out of the cave.
Zudi made it clear that she wouldn't be comfortable with Mark traveling out on his own power.
These situations are tricky because they can get more severe just in an instance.
She didn't feel comfortable with an undiagnosed bleed, that you have no idea what's really going on in there. So we knew there would be a rescue at that point.
Coming up, it would take the combined effort of dozens of international experts to try to rescue Mark.
It was hours upon hours upon hours, days being hauled out of the cave.
But first, some campfire information for outdoor enthusiasts hoping to stay warm.
There is nothing quite like camping and sleeping under the stars. But are you informed on campfire safety?
If you're in the wilderness and building a campfire, prepare the pit by clearing the surrounding area and create a barrier by using rocks or bricks. Keep the flames small. A manageable fire is always easier to contain. And always keep water or a fire extinguisher nearby in case of emergency.
Finally, before you call it a night, be sure to extinguish the fire by dousing it with water and stirring the ashes and embers. 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans, so be campfire smart, safe, and sensible.
After close to a week of agonizing days being underground without medical attention, doctors and an international team of rescuers were able to climb down and treat Mark Dickey's internal bleeding.
I was with him for 6 days. I did the transfusions, and he was quite good.
And more help was on the way.
members of the caving community came from far and wide to try and help save Mark's life.
Eventually, Bulgarians arrived. They came by car. And then Polish arrived, Croatians arrived, Italian team arrived. And then, of course, the European Cave Rescue Association and the Turkish government.
Upon reaching Mark, the rescue teams implored Jessica to exit the cave.
You know that at some point, because you know the patient, you are seen more as a liability, and that they don't want that emotional attachment between the rescuer and the patient to interfere.
She begrudgingly agreed to leave her loved one behind. But once Jessica was above ground, Mark's condition took another sharp decline.
He stressed himself out too much, so the bleeding started once again, and he became hypovolemic once again, so I had to treat the shock.
Dr. Zudi was able to get Mark stabilized, but he was in desperate need of specialized medical attention.
I was in this interesting balance of being somewhat ambulatory, but at that time, not physically capable of climbing out of the cave myself.
This would require an immensely complicated and tightly coordinated extraction.
Rescuers began preparing the cave to get Mark out.
Even as rescuers arrived and got down to 1,000 meters, got down to me, you are re-rigging the cave for rescue. So it took countless people hours upon hours working their way through 3,000 vertical feet of rope and re-bolting every single station, re-rigging virtually everything, preparing plans for systems.
And the extraction was made even more complex because Mark was strapped onto an 8-foot stretcher, or litter.
Moving someone in a stretcher can be very difficult. You have tight squeezes, you have to go up or down under rocks, places where the stretcher can't fit.
There was no simplicity here. The cave is 1,000 meters of vertical rock that twists and turned and with shape and contours.
It was entirely human-powered. Mark is in a stretcher, there's ropes pulling him up. They're using counterweight systems to haul him.
You have to get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people to help move that.
It was hours upon hours upon hours, days in this litter being hauled out of the cave. A lot of work by a lot of people.
Finally, on day 12, Mark emerged from the cave.
I was just running, and I got a hand on the stretcher because I really wanted to be one of the people to help carry him back to the camp. There's a lot of spotlight, a lot of lights, press, cameras.
It was a huge relief getting him out of that cave. Once we heard that he was out, we just kind of rejoiced, and we kind of had a little party on the surface once everybody got out of the cave.
Mark was immediately choppered out and got to a hospital where he was stabilized and started healing. But oddly, doctors still don't know what caused that internal bleeding.
I can give you guesses, but because of the time it took to get out of the cave, from when the bleed happened to when I actually got to the hospital and had imaging performed, I believe it was 12 days, it had already healed enough to be uncertain.
Despite the mysterious nature of his illness, Mark made a full recovery, thanks to Jessica, Dr. Zudi, and dozens of international cave rescuers.
Cave rescuers are heroes. You know, the ones that came out to get me out of the cave are absolutely heroes. They're amazing people. I appreciate each and every one of them. Caving is a community where you can travel anywhere in the world, and even if you don't speak the same language, cavers are cavers are cavers. I consider them family.
If it wasn't for the efforts of Jessica doing what she did in the initial stages of the rescue, there's no way Mark would have made it. Some of the medical interventions that were made underground, there's no guidebook for that stuff. Dr. Zudi and Jessica, they had to improvise on the fly and do some medical things that not every doctor ever even gets to think about.
Jessica saved my life first. Zudi got into the cave. I'd say she saved my life second. And then all of these rescuers together got me out of the cave and saved me.
I helped save Mark's life.
How does it feel to say that?
Well, you're making me tear up. It feels good.
Whether at work or at play, safety gear like helmets and protective clothing are the key to keeping you safe.
Because of our busy world, rules can sometimes be easy to overlook. But it's important for everyone's protection to review the guidelines and make safety a top priority. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Hearts of Heroes.